the Newtonian physical world of the industrial age to the Einstein's relativistic and quantum physical world of the 21st centuries. And in the industrial age of the Newtonian world, time, space, and matter were separate, independent. So our education was focused mainly on the transmission of knowledges, fragmented knowledge, departmental education. In the 21st century and now we live in the interconnected or interlocked. So our education system should be based on the whole person educations, networking, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary. So we are in the age of the very complex world. Also, we have to combine not only the different academic disciplines, also we have to combine nation to a nation and physical and metaphysicals. And so we have this afternoon a very distinguished guest in this field. And first speaker was Barbara Grobaski, and he's a professor. She is a professor of education at Penn State. Why don't you give a big hand? Thank you. And second speaker is Professor Christoph Koch, a professor of cognitive and behavioral biology at Caltech. And I will introduce later further. Also, we have the content is Ko Jung-hwan from the Songjung-Kwan Universities, and also Dong-hee Lee. He is a president of the Asia Pacific Association for International Education. So we will start first with Barbara. Each speaker has about 20 minutes for presentation. For this content, about 15 minutes. So we have to finish up in 80 minutes. That will give some time. Okay. I'd like to introduce Barbara Grobaski, and Barbara Grobaski is a professor of education in the instructional system program, College of Education at Penn State Universities, and currently also serves as a secretary of International Board of Standard for Training and Performance and Instruction. And she was the president of the organization for that organization for 6 years prior. Or she also had academic appointment at Syracuse Universities, also University of Maryland School of Medicine. She also received two book awards from the Association for Educational Communication and Technology, and published widely, and has been invited keynote speakers on 4 continents. We are very pleased to have Professor Barbara Grobaski. Why don't you get a big hand? Welcome. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, distinguished participants, I'd like to begin by thanking the organizing committee for an opportunity to think about inventive higher education strategies through ICT and consider how little devices like this, and hopefully soon the e-Galaxy will be coming out, or the Galaxy Pad, and considering how those devices can change higher education. And in a way so that students then become ready and open to solve problems in the future. This is an issue, the issue of emerging ICT is one that I care about and have been addressing over my career. And in that, I'd like to take opportunities to shatter and replace, not just chatter, but replace faculty paradigms about their traditional paradigms about teaching and learning in higher education. So that comes to the first premise that I have, and I'd like to share that premise with you now, is that I believe that we're on the threshold of another opportunity to redefine learning in higher education, so that we can promote student thinking and thinking systemically and in ways that would promote problem solving. And I think that that we have this opportunity to do this in two important ways. The first way is to bring global human resources, information resources, and tools for thinking together to promote student thinking. The second is to change the perception of the traditional role of the faculty as expert to expert and learning landscaper. Some may call this facilitator, but I see this at a much broader role. I'm not a big proponent of taking the expert out of the faculty role or the faculty paradigm. It's important that he or she has actually walked the walk in their field so that they can craft meaningful learning landscapes of people, resources, and tools by knowing who in this global world to call upon, what are their credible resources to draw upon, and what tools are relevant for their trade. So I've been doing this for several years, and from the very first in the medical school, when computer-based instruction was first introduced, using Control Data's Plato system, to try to create simulations and have faculty think about using simulations in their learning. The second one was to actually conceptualize and operationalize a Bachelor of Science in Nuclear Science using, again, Control Data's Plato system, which I like to fondly call Internet Zero, and to bring education to nuclear reactor operators across the U.S. Another example of this is reinventing large lecture classes at Penn State. One particular example was working with statistics professors to make the class or to transform that class into active, collaborative learning environment that was based on motivational principles of attention, relevance, competence, and satisfaction. And then finally, one of the more recent activities has been to conceptualize internet resources for teachers in the middle school and to try to bring NASA resources into their classroom. And one example of that was Kids as Airborne Mission Scientists. So with this background, I'd like to go through the analysis of things that are important in considering a new paradigm with access to these tools, these global tools. So the first is understanding the task. It's very important that you understand what are the cognitive requirements for the task. The faculty member must know what it is they expect the learners to be thinking about and how they're expecting for them to think about. If, in fact, it's about analysis, they need to provide them with some tools for decomposing, comparing, etc., so that the learning activities or the learning strategies that they select are based on the kind of cognitive processes that are required underneath. And if they want to have them do problem solving, they need to be able to facilitate problem representation, think like experts to decompose a situation so that they can proceed to actually solve problems, etc. These are just some examples. In addition to this, the understanding the task, we have the people who are going to bring together in this world what, besides the learners, which peers or how will you engage peers, how will you engage faculty as experts, and how are you going to engage external experts that are now available. And through these devices, like the iPad that I have in my hand, and the applications that are actually on those devices. What's important is that these last two ideas of the who and the how, they're different now. They enable faculty members to do things differently in their classroom because of this emerging web affordances that are unchained. They enable different learning landscapes that match more closely to what we know is ideal learning. And so the faculty member's role then becomes one of trying to create this learning landscape of a myriad of people from around the world, myriad of technologies, and a myriad of learning activities. So understanding the who and the how and how you bring those together is important. So one model that we used at NASA, the National Aeronautics Space Administration, was to create this notion of the ID prism, which is a perspective of thinking about innovation. Here we have possibilities, realities, issues, standards, and multidimensional perspectives. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about possibilities and standards, and then conclude with some examples of realities and some issues that need to be considered as well. So possibilities, I like to start with these technological devices in shattering paradigms of traditional faculty members who think that the only way you can teach instruction. In fact, I had a faculty member say that to me when we were developing this engineering program. The only way you can teach is with this piece of chalk and this blackboard, and it has to be within my classroom. But these technological devices enable us to go beyond the classroom and learn in the rooms, as you see here, on students' desktops, or actually on the lawn, or using the iPad or the laptops as they're going on the bullet train in collaboration with others. So I like to think of this as learning unchained with mobile learning. But the web is really it's not that we have these technologies, it's what do we do with them that's important. And Web 1.0 is enabled learners to be information gatherers, from the access to vast global information resources, vast global human resources that they could come and bring to bear in their learning. But then the second, Web 2.0, which was much more exciting than the information gatherer, was to actually become an information or knowledge creator. And the web enabled learners to actually contribute to web knowledge, contribute by working with resources, human and information resources, and try to build their own understanding as well as contribute to the knowledge that's already out there. And then Web 3.0, the cognitive web, which I think is much more exciting, is enabling learners to become knowledge partners. Not knowledge partners with other individuals, but knowledge partners with technology. And so there are being developed many cognitive thinking applications, data analysis tools that are available in these mobile learning devices through applications. One very important one, I think, for us in this global world are these translators. So instead of having to have a translator and listen in this device located here in this building, in this room, these translators that do the lower level cognitive tasks of translation so that students can then focus on the higher order thinking of what are they going to actually do with the knowledge that's translated. So the thing that is exciting is that the cloud, what they call cloud computing, and I'm not a computer scientist, I don't describe this from the technical terms of cloud computing. But the fact that I like to think about this as an opportunity for learning because it takes all of the information from here and puts it into the cloud. It's a workspace, as it were, a digital storage and workspace in the sky. And by taking it from here and putting it out there, other people can react to it. Other people can help build knowledge. So, but it's not that it's available, it's how it's actually used that's important. And the S in the ID PRISM is looking at standards for learning. And when I look at standards for learning, there are what I like to call 4 essential elements for learning engagement, things that we know about learning. So the influences of cognitive psychology, generative learning, they've been very important in formation of my understanding, and also social constructivism. We know that these 4 elements are important to be built in, and when you look at new technologies, you have to ask yourself, are these afforded via those technologies? So we know that learners have to be active and reflective. That not just being active, there's some research that we had done on simulations before indicated that just going over a simulation over and over again doesn't necessarily produce learning. But having them reflect on that learning makes a difference in terms of how quickly they could actually go through simulations. So active and reflective is important, but also collaborative. We know from social constructivism that collaborating and discussing and talking about understanding is important to development. But I also add another component to that is open to expert feedback. So not just collaboration where peers talk to peers, but also have an opportunity to get expert feedback on what they're thinking. And therein, again, is where it's very important that the faculty member is not just facilitator, but also expert in their particular field. So in the realities of higher education classroom, I'm going to talk about pretty traditional classrooms and share with you 2 scenarios on, or 2 learning landscapes based on the affordances of Web 2.0 and one on Web 2.0 and 3.0. The first one is an example of moving the classroom borders outside the classroom campus and country. In this particular case, the task here is a course that is teaching principles of diffusion of innovation, and I thank Dr. Ali Carr-Chalman for this example that she had done several years ago, but without the affordances that we now have through the web. And so what I'm doing in this particular example is enhancing what it was that she had done several years ago. So in this case, we bring people together, 4 experts from 3 universities, students from 3 universities, collaborating together on understanding these principles of diffusion of innovation. So the learning landscape is configured by support for the knowledge gatherer. So recorded web lectures delivered by faculty experts, readings, web articles and textbooks, support for the knowledge creator, discussion forums, collaborative documents, feedback from experts, and blogs for reflection and feedback from faculty. So as we look at the tools that the web has afforded in that kind of a university environment, or podcasts, blogs, Google Docs, discussion forums, web presentations, and web resources. So, but there are issues when you try to do something across universities and you do something globally. We have a lot of administrative policies that try to prevent what we want to do, what we know is good learning. And coordination among all of the players in that learning scenario. But in addition to those issues, we have faculty issues. And this, I can actually speak from my hat as the former president of the International Board of Standards for Training, Performance, and Instruction, is that we need to have faculty skilled in using these technological devices in appropriate ways. Plus, we also have to have attitudes. We also address faculty attitudes about using these technologies. And the way that we have done this in the past is to show how these tools can improve learning. One of the things that I've found in working with faculty across the disciplines is that one way to convince them and to excite them about new ways of thinking is to show them that learning is occurring in their students. Faculty are concerned about how students learn. And so in these new technologies, we need to be thinking about those pieces as well as convincing faculty. So in the second learning landscape, this is an international negotiation skills course, again, to try to break the mold of learning in that desk, in that place. So it's wherever, whenever. Sounds a little bit like the W here in the hotel. So this one, the course was teaching principles of international negotiation, and I built on this one some ideas from a University of Maryland University College class where they were bringing together learners from Japan and the U.S. Thank you. And in this particular case, I'm changing it to Korea and the U.S. again and trying to build on the affordances of Web 2.0 and 3.0, where students in two countries, experts external to the university, with peer teams and paired teams. So peer teams were within the country and paired teams were external to the paired teams from the U.S. and from Korea working together in practicing negotiation. So the learning landscape that's configured here with technological devices and Web 2.0 resources and tools, again, provides support for the knowledge gatherer, support for the knowledge creator, and support here from the knowledge partner. In this particular case, the web is moving, the applications are moving very quickly, using tools that help translate. And I think that's one of the very exciting ways. In this case, blogs, wikis, discussion forums, web presentations, web resources, Skype, Adobe Connect, Twitter, and Translate are some of the tools that can be brought to bear on this particular situation. So again, we have learning landscape issues, administrative policy, coordination, but also access. And in addition to that, faculty skills in using these types of tools that are available on the web, plus attitude toward their use. So I'd like to conclude in using this quote to challenge us. And there are two actually parts of this that I really I think are important, and that is the simultaneously sentence that talks about communication and cognitive tools needed to support deep, relevant, participatory learning for the 21st century, and what our learners are really expecting when they come to school. Choice, opportunity for expression, interactive communication, access to knowledge. And I'm very excited about this generation moving into higher education because of what their expectation is, and we no longer then have to teach them how to use the tools. They'll come already knowing how to use the tools, because that interferes in some of the research that I've done in the past. Tools interfere with that actual learning. So we have to have faculty to create this landscape of opportunities for their students to be knowledge gatherers, knowledge builders, and utilizers of web app tools in partnership. So again, it's not that the students have access, it's what they do that's going to actually make a difference in learning. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Professor Globalization, for excellent presentation. We need new educational technologies for new centuries. Thank you for your presentation. And next speaker is the Professor Christoph Koch. And he is the Professor of Cognitive and Behavioral Biology at the California Institute of Technology. And he is also distinguished Chair Professor Louis and Victor Trendel, Chair Professor of Cognitive and Behavioral Biology at Caltech. He has many honors on the Alexander Humboldt Research Prize, also Bernard Usher Fellow in San Francisco Exploratoriums, California. Also, he is a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Science. I want to with a big hand.
Thank you much. Thank you much, Professor Kim. I'm not quite sure why I'm here. I've been asked 2 weeks ago to attend this conference. I'm a WCU professor here for my second year now at the. This is a government program organized by the Korean government to bring foreign faculty to Korea since my second year now here at Korea University. So for those 2 years, I've sort of observed teaching. So I don't have a background in education. My background is in physics and in engineering. So from this perspective, as a professor educating undergraduate and graduate students, I was asked to make a few comments. So my background, I'm a physicist. And I run a large lab that's dedicated to biology and engineering. We just had a Nature paper published today on brain science. And I'm a professor both of biology and in engineering. So I've been educating kids, undergraduate at MIT and at Caltech since 24 years. And I've also taught at some of these other places. And so this is a small group of rather highly selected students. And so all my comments really apply to educating to educating a very small fraction of each yearly cohort of incoming students, particularly really educating those people who obsess about mathematics and science and technology, who are driven, who have a passion for understanding the universe, who have a passion for understanding mathematics, and who might have a passion for taking all that knowledge from physics and mathematics and translating it into technology. So in any given year, in any given university, this really only applies to a small fraction of the university population. So I'm not addressing here the needs to provide a broad college education for a large part of each education, but I really care about kids who obsess and who are passionate about science and engineering. Now, I was trying to get some statistics, and I had a difficult time. Okay, this is a motivational quote. I love it. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules. They have no respect for the status quo. You can praise them, disagree with them, quote them, disbelieve them, glorify or vilify them. But the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward, and while some see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. This is not from a university perspective, but this is actually from Apple Computer. So this is these are the kids that I'm interested in educating, and trying to get some statistics. I looked at, now what I'm doing here is like tracking the extent to which a population engages in sports by looking at gold medal winners from the Olympics. That's essentially what I'm doing. So here I got some statistics. Of course, they all suffer from being low ends. Example of scientific elites, I'm looking at science Nobel Prizes. So I'm only looking at the science prizes. So that is physics, chemistry, and medicine or physiology. So I'm not looking at peace, literature, and economics. So I'm looking at all the prizes that's been awarded since roughly more than 100 years. 1901 was the first award made. This is from a great paper. You can Google it online by Jürgen Schmidhofer, where he collects all the statistics. Because there's an interesting point to be made. I'm spending half a year now here in Asia, here in Japan and in Tokyo and in Singapore, and I'm always being asked, when are we going to see Asian Nobel Prizes? Of course, the Chinese had one, but they're not so happy about that one. So here, if we look at this, so this is the fraction of Nobel prizes in the sciences. So if you look at any given year, you know, so for example, if you look at 1965, which is where the line goes down, right? So it tells you that the line indicates that in this year, the dominant power till then, Germany, in terms of Nobel prizes, by citizenship, switched over to USA. So you can see that roughly 25% of all the Nobel prizes between 1901 and 1965, you know, some fraction, like 20% were given to Germany, 20% to people of American citizenship, and you know, UK, France. So there's a very strong European bias, of course, there. Now it's really interesting because we're here interested in long-term trends. Are we going to see now a long-term trend, as I think, of course, we will see over the next decade or two towards Asian Nobel prizes? If you now look at by country of birth, right? So we are now looking at the same people, but in the previous statistics we looked at the time of their Nobel Prize, what was their citizenship? And here we're looking at where were they actually born. Now here you can see, so you know, the shift towards America happened 10 years later. Why? Well, that's of course a brain drain that you had people in Europe, particularly in Germany, in Austria, who fled from the Nazis and who went to the US. The point about it, it's a very long-term secular trend. Here it takes 12 years. So here, for example, here they just looked at the sort of, if you want, cultural influence. They looked at all the Nobel prizes that were given to people that speak German, i.e. From Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, versus all the Nobel prizes that were given. I don't know what they did with the French. I guess they disregarded them. Versus all the prizes that were given to people with English, which is of course UK, US, Canada, and New Zealand. Again, you can see there's a trend there. You can again see this difference in this roughly a decade where it switches from sort of Germanic dominated to American dominated. The point is it's going to take a long time, and I think we'll also see that, ultimately we'll also see that in terms of Asian countries getting Nobels. The few lessons here is many factors contribute to success. In this case here, probably cultural factors really predominate, the way people are educated and the way people are selected in terms of Nobel prizes. It takes decades for changes to become effective. So let's look at one institution that seems very good at producing Nobel prizes, which is this place. This is a mission statement. The mission of the California Institute of Technology is to expand human knowledge and benefit society through research integrated with education. So this is the university I'm at since 24 years. And I wanted to, particularly in comparison with KU, Korea University, where I'm right now, I wanted to look at some differences in what does it take to educate us, to educate people to really excel in science and in technology, a small fraction of them. Okay, so one thing, it's a small school, and I think it's really critical. If you look at, for example, Trinity College in Cambridge, which has almost been more successful than anybody else in terms of producing elite scientists. For example, Steve Hawkins is from there. These are small numbers. So the total size of the school is 900 undergrads over all 4 years, roughly 2/3 male and 1/3 female. You have to have a very small ratio of student to faculty. As Professor Grabowski emphasized, the faculty is really critical. I mean, technology is great, but really the sine qua non of teaching is faculty. So here you have a student-to-faculty ratio of 3:1. For every 3 students, there's 1 professor. Graduate students are 1,200 graduate students, roughly, once again, 2/3 male, 1/3 female. Here it's a 4:1 student-faculty ratio. Again, so a very low one. Total faculty is 300, so it's roughly 2,000 students and 300 professors. 600 postdocs and more than 2,000 staff that support the science and the education. So the only statistics here I wanted to show, so there are a total of 32 Nobel Prizes at Caltech, which comes out to be, it's an interesting number I computed, it's 1, so for every 1,400 alumni, it's 1 Nobel Prize. That's not bad. All right. So in terms of ranking, it's right now it's number 2, just after Harvard. In engineering, it's number 1 worldwide. All right, so it's a small school that really only concentrates on science and technology. It's biology, chemistry, engineering, geology and planetary sciences. The Richter scale comes from Caltech, humanities, and physics. One thing I think that's really important, makes a big difference with the quality of the student education, is most students live on campus. Because there are only 900 kids, 900 undergrads, 95% of the undergrads live in on-campus housing. I think it makes a big difference. And a smaller fraction of the graduate students live on campus. So this is so most of the undergrads, when they get their BS in science, they go on either directly or within a few years on to get a PhD or an MD PhD. So one thing that we do very well at Caltech, everybody, no matter what they do, all those 900 kids have to have what's called a core curriculum. It's like something University of Chicago pioneered in my country. Everybody has to take a core set of classes. So independent, no matter whether you're going to graduate in computer science, or in geology, or in mathematics, you have to take 5/4 physics, you have to take 5/4 of mathematics, 3/4 of chemistry, you have to take some biology. You have to pick from a menu which either includes astronomy or geology or environmental sciences. You have to take lab classes, and you have to take human social sciences. I think it's really critical. So by the time everybody leaves, these kids, they all have a very solid background in both mathematics and in science, bar none. The other thing that I learned, or at least that I learned in teaching, and how do kids learn and how do I learn over the last 25 years, it's got to be fun. If it's not fun, you're not going to learn nearly as well as it is fun. So what we try to do very hard is make all the classes we teach competitive, and we try to make them interesting and challenging. So this is, for example, a class, mechanical engineering design. This is in MacE, mechanical engineering. So here the kids, they're being asked during this class that's being taught for 1/4, where they learn mechanical design and CAD/CAM design, etc. They actually at the end have to compete in a competition. So this is a Caltech viewed from above, where they have to build a little robotic device. You can see him here, a little robotic device that swims on its own and then climbs up at the other end of the pool and comes around. So they have to work in team. It's very important, again, as the previous speaker emphasized, to have these collaborative teams. But it's all about practical, hands-on training. It's absolutely essential to have lab classes. It is critical. If you just have theoretical classes, it's just no good. You know, we're all inundated with information, no matter whether it's presented on an iPad or an iPhone, on a Galaxy, or on your PC. It doesn't matter. It has to be practical. So here it's practical because as part of this class in mechanical engineering, you have to actually build something. You have to machine things, you have to fiddle around, you have to breadboard circuits up, and you have to build these little robots and get them to do something at the end. And then you win. It's a big thing. The other thing we do, we expose the students. I think it's absolutely essential in my experience that you expose the students as early as you can to research. So we do this already when we take kids from the high school. So when the high school graduates apply and they become are accepted, already then we take them into 10-week SURF programs. So SURF is called Summer Undergraduate Research Fellow, where pre-frost, so people who have been accepted to Caltech, but it's between the end of the high school and the beginning of college, they can do research, and then in their first, second, and third year, between the academic year and summer, they can do research. So it's an organized program where they have to apply and they have to write a proposal to work in a particular professor's lab on a particular topic. You get mentored either by a grad student or by a postdoc or by the professor himself. And at the end, you have to give a presentation. You have to submit a technical paper and you have to give a presentation. And the kids love it. I mean, 2/3 of students do it and they really love it. And they really see firsthand what science is all about. Because science is not about sitting in a classroom and rehearsing the periodic table. Science is about discovering, going out there and asking questions and getting nature to answer those questions, or building something and seeing how this thing that you've built, how it performs in the real world. So I think it's important. It's very important to get people involved in such research as soon as possible. So that's really all I had to say. I think if you want to educate people to do science and engineering well, you need very intense hands-on exposure. So that means it's difficult to do in very large numbers, but we're talking about a small set of people here. Percentage-wise, a small fraction of people has to be intense hand-on exposure to science and engineering. there has to be a low student-faculty ratio. In other words, the government has to invest in, if it wants a large fraction of the population to be educated to this level, that you hire a lot of faculty, you have time and incentive to actually spend with the students building stuff. I do it all the time. I take kids out for dinner. It's very enjoyable. You should expose them very early on to research, not just wait till after they graduate, but already do it in the first, second, and third year, expose them to intense research. Be very flexible in requirements, because particularly these kids, those rebels, those misfits, those square that have to fit into a square, those round pegs that fit into a square hole, they really have all sorts of strange and bizarre requirements, and you better be very flexible in order to accommodate these kids. You have to retain a play-like environment. It's important that people really enjoy themselves. There's competition, social competition. It always helps greatly. Same thing for graduate students. Get them only to do very few classes and get them into research as early and as soon as possible. Particularly what I find is not very productive in my experience is large-scale rote memorization. When you understand the need for taking large-scale tests in order to screen a general population, but when you're talking about a small population of kids who really need just the right motivation in order to excel and take off and change the world, this large-scale memorization produces kids who are very good at one thing. They're like learning machines. They are very good at learning the material and reproducing it on command and passing the test at the 99% percentile. But those kids very often are not the kids who are really going to lead to the breakthrough. For those, you need kids who are motivated, and you can't usually motivate them by just taking these rote tests. So I think there's a definitely trade-off there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. And we have to learn from Caltech. As you know, Caltech is very small. It's not well known in Korea. But in the States, they produce the highest Nobel Prize winners. And the small school focused science and education. And we usually go to the big university, and also defocused. And Caltech is one model we have to, Korea has to learn to get Nobel Prize. Okay, thank you for your excellent presentation and giving us insight on higher education. Thank you very much. Next is our speaker is Ko Jang-wan, and Ko Jang-wan is a professor at higher education in Seongungan universities. He got a PhD from the University of Missouri, Columbia. Before joining to the faculty, he was senior research associate at Georgia Mason Universities, and also he worked at CADI. Let's welcome him.
Thank you. Do you have mic here? All right, yeah, that's good. Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Grobowski and Koch. I enjoy your presentation. Actually, Dr. Grobowski and Dr. Koch gave the excellent presentation with a good, excellent example. So I'd like to give just a brief comment and a couple of questions regarding their presentation. For Dr. Grobowski, it is a very interesting topic in terms of creating new teaching and learning environment in higher education, especially using the technology. But one of my interests is the implementations of the idea in the classroom and or in the real school setting. I believe that to implement the idea, faculty, especially the professors, need to put tremendous time and energy for teaching. Unlike secondary schools, many professors in higher education do not really have interest in teaching and learning. This is true especially for large research institutions. So my question here is that what would be the role of faculty in enhancing student learning? Actually, you mentioned a couple of things about the faculty. I mean, they need to change some kind of the using technology. Also, they need to change about the attitude toward the technology. But I think the matter is the attitude toward learning and teaching itself. Yeah. And related to this topic, Dr. Grobowski also mentioned about the administrative and coordinating issues. I'm wondering what would be the role of institution? More specifically, how can you build or rearrange the supporting system or administrative structure in a university to create effective teaching and learning environment? Actually, I'm a founding director of a Center for the Institutional Effectiveness at Seongkyungwan University, and one of my interests is how we can possibly build the effective teaching and learning environment, actually. So I have tried to find the best way to find for the university to create effective supporting system enhancing student learning. This is especially important to Korean higher education now. The government just launched the A-3 project, the advancement of college education, this spring. This is a national initiative heavily focusing on teaching and learning in a college instead of research. I believe that the role of institution is critical to produce real successful outcomes. For Dr. Koch's presentation, I think this is a good example on how a university actually doing what to be a leading university. Focusing on elite school, Dr. Koch introduced the excellence of Caltech and provided some lessons. Without doubt, we all knew that the Caltech is one of the best institutions in the world. University which want to be the top university might have good insight on what they can learn from Caltech. When I listened to the presentation, I have thought about two things. One is whether the size of institution matter or not. As Dr. Koch mentioned that Caltech has only about 2,100 students, 900 undergraduate and 1,200 graduate. In terms of student enrollment, Caltech is a very small school. With excellent resources and small size, certainly help implementation. Certainly help implement innovative idea and more interaction between faculty and student. Actually, one of the things I was shocked is they have the more staff than the student. They have more than about 2,600 staff members. Second, the theme of this session is the future of higher education. When we talk about the future of higher education, we are usually focusing on top leading universities. However, although many universities and colleges want to be one of the leaders and top schools, majority of institutions remained kind of regular the school. Again, majority of students are enrolled in the regular institutions. My question here is what kind of policy or strategies could help the university, thus the regular university, enhance student learning and institutional effectiveness? I asked a couple of questions, for example, like a role of institutions to enhancing student learning, but to the presenters. But I believe that those questions are for ourselves, especially scholars in Korean higher education and audience here. Those are the topics we should think of now, especially in Korean higher education. Thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you, Professor Koch. And he asked the several questions. I'll give you 5 minutes to the Professor Globalization, also 5 minutes for Christopher Cox and for answering his question. Then we will follow with Professor Lee. Okay.
Can I go first?
Yes.
Professor Koh, thank you very much for your question. I think it's extremely relevant, and it's been my experience that both the questions about faculty and institutional support are interrelated, most definitely. In the program in the early 1980s of the distance education program, the Bachelor of Science in Nuclear Science, it was so important to be able to develop the infrastructure at the university to support the faculty members to actually transform their courses into effective learning environments. And so that institution. It was the beginning of the Office of Distance Delivery, and in that office they had people like myself as instructional designers working with faculty to do a lot of the support work to create innovative learning modules, as it were, to teach. At Penn State, it's exactly the same situation there. We have the World Campus, and in the World Campus, the faculty members are supported by instructional designers and evaluators and webmasters and so on to help create the learning environments and learning events through the Angel system at that point. So faculty members are more likely to adopt these tools if they do have the support from the institution. On the other hand, what I'm also seeing is that over the years there is less of a need for these kinds of supporting individuals because of the emerging web technology. It's becoming easier to actually create these tools and these opportunities for having students having a venue for reflections through blogs and creating wikis. It's not hard anymore to do that. And so I'm seeing more faculty engaged in that. And the other, I guess one other final point that I'd like to make is that in the statistics classes, the large lecture classes where we were having students climb over desks and measure heads and do those kinds of activities, as soon as the faculty member saw how engaged the learners were in using those strategies, they were more likely to engage in them themselves. And that, in fact, changed to statistics education through a Pew Foundation grant.
Thank you. Professor Koch, can you in the...
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is critical that the institution supports the educational mission of faculty. This is, I think, one weakness of the modern research-oriented university. So we don't get tenure based on how we teach, right? There's very little, while the university, and, this is the same everywhere, at least in the US and in Europe, which I know well, the university pays lip service, but the fact is you get tenure based purely on your quality of your research. And so in that sense, whether or not, if you teach well, okay, if you don't teach well, you still get tenure if your research is good enough. So I think that's a weakness that has to be addressed, that it becomes a more part of the evaluation package, that it does not. So people are trying to change that. Universities are trying to change it using salary. So some places in the US, the salary increment is coupled to the student evaluation, which I think is a good thing to do.
Okay, next panelist is Professor Dong-Hee Lee. He is currently the professor at Korea University. But also, Professor Lee Dong-Hee Lee is the leading scholars in the field of marketing and a key proponent of the Korea University's globalization. And since 2004, Professor Lee has spearheaded the foundation of the Asia Pacific Association for International Education. And currently he is serving as a president of the association. Let's welcome him.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I think this is a very good opportunity to talk about education in the future. We just learned that the high tech can be a good source for enhancing better education, and also what would be the best quality of research-oriented university. With that, I'd like to have a little bit different point of comment regarding collaboration among universities. So I titled that this is Inventing Asia-Pacific International Education Collaboration. This is what I have done so far for the last 5-6 years in making collaboration among Asian universities, because Asian universities are very good, but within their own territory, which is very much domestically oriented. And so that the education is not much international. That means their students are good in their own nation, but not as global leaders. So, in Asia, I believe that the Asian universities must cooperate and collaborate to educate future Asian leaders who can lead the Asia to make Asian era. So if you look at the in the world, there are 3 different associations to cover each region. In North America, there is a NAFSA, and in Europe, EAIE, and in Asia Pacific, APAIE, which is established in 2006. And the API is one of the most influential and highly respected the international higher education organizations, particularly by representing Asia Pacific. This aims to achieve a greater collaboration among the universities, and also it tries to promote the quality of international programs, activities in this region. This is a brief history that the association was founded in 2006 with 2 or 3 years of preparation, and we had the first annual conference at Korea University, and then National University of Singapore, then Waseda University, Japan, and Renmin University in China, and Griffith University in Australia. In the next year, we're going to have a conference at National Taiwan University in April. And in 2012, it's already decided that the Mahidol University at Thailand, we're going to have the conference. The topics were, as you can see here, trends and changes in Asia Pacific higher education, and also Renaissance and next wave, and developing leadership and enhancing harmony, and educating for extremes. And in the next year, it's going to be Asia Pacific education impacting the world, because we were impacted by the world, but now we think that maybe it's the time to give some impact to the world. Well, these are some photos we have taken. Lot of discussions and interactions. And the participants, for example, in 2010, because we had the conference at the Gold Coast in Australia, 36% was Australian, and 31 Asia, and 21 Europe and America, and so on. And the number of participants and number of countries, institutions, and booths are increasing so far. And by having these conferences and listening to the speakers and exchanging ideas, I just learned that we have about 3 different issues. One is a comprehension, the other one is a collaboration and consortium. The Asia region is a supply region. Suppliers with the universities in Asia are suppliers to the world, the students to send out to different continents. As you can see here, these are about 46.8% of students abroad are sent by Asia. So Asian region is a sending region, not the receiving region. But then now it is becoming a little bit. We are facing a little bit change that many students from Europe are very interested in Asia, and we are looking and watching the fact that we have many student exchanges among European universities and American universities. Collaboration. Well, but then if you think yourself, we look back what we are doing. We look back, and then I just found that we do not have mutual respect for neighboring countries, not as much to the Western countries like United States and European countries. So what happened to the universities in Asia is that they're too much domestically oriented, and so that the students who graduated from Asian universities do not understand what's going on in the neighboring countries. So when we have Asian century, I'm very pessimistic that the leaders in each country, whoever in the government or companies, if they do not understand the neighboring country's culture and society, how can he make Asian century? It's impossible. So what we need right now in this region is a collaboration among higher education institutions to raise and to nurture future leaders of this region altogether. Another one is about the consortium, and we need to make a consortium or a system to encourage to have free exchange students freely among Asian universities, so that then we can have an Asian university community. So with that in my mind, I initiated another organization under APAIE that it is called Asia Pacific Leaders. The APAIE is an association for administrators of universities, presidents and directors and specialists. Then I thought that this benefit must go to the students directly. So this is Asia Pacific Leaders Institution or organization, and I persuaded 23 university presidents of this region. They all agreed to join as a board of directors because they understood the necessity of the collaboration to raise and to educate Asia future leaders. So these universities are the member universities at the beginning of APL, and so we had the first program at Hanyang University in Seoul, Korea this year, and for a full month we had 2 classes, and we organized the student body, and after graduation they are still working on something for Asia online, and we are going to make an alumni association, and so that after 20 years we believe that these people will be really the Asian leaders who understand each other, who are already friends. Okay, these are some pictures and the happy faces of that. Well, in summarizing, in Asia, the universities must pursue the excellence of research and excellence of education, but yet we need to collaborate each other. We need to exchange ideas to make our universities to become more internationalized and to give more contribution to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this session. This session entitled was Inventive Higher Educational strategies. As you know, we are facing with dramatic changes. Also, we have to change our paradigm. And education is not just for transmitting knowledge only. And we have to develop the whole person education with a global perspective. UNESCO, they recently announced in 2009 and reforming higher education in the 21st century. UNESCO in the communiques is higher education itself is confronted with formidable challenges and must proceed to the most radical changes and renewal it has ever been required to undertake. So that our society, which is currently undergoing a profound crisis of values, can transcend mere economic considerations and incorporate deeper dimensions of morality and spirituality. I think this is important. We don't have education not just for economic considerations and for world peace and prosperity. We have to think as a whole human being. Also, we need a collaboration between nations and whole in the global scale. And to speak from overseas, very thankful to panelists. Thank you very much. Let's give a big hand.